If you were outside over the weekend, you felt the beginnings of the summer to come. Very sunny, very hot, very dry. Some like it hot. And for those who don't, they have pools to swim in, air conditioning, iced drinks to stave off the heat. It's not the same for our furred, feathered, or other covered family pets. The summer heat can be deadly for them. And they are family. With the birth rate half of what it was in the 1950s, more and more people see pets as family. In fact, you now see people carrying them around in stores, restaurants, casinos, and that brings up another issue we'll talk about. Should there be limits to where people can bring their pets? Shadi Ireifej is the Chief Medical Officer at VetTriage.com. Shadi, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to be back again.
Yeah, great to have you, Doctor. You know, I'll get to the point here. We're starting to see triple-digit temperatures in Las Vegas. Some pet owners might be thinking about getting their furrier pets shaved to cool them down. Is that generally a good idea?
It's not the most practical idea. You can argue that it's certainly helpful to have less hair, but at the same time, they have that hair for a reason, and it's quite the endeavor for either a veterinary clinic or a groomer to shave the entire pet's body. Plus, the hair has to eventually grow back, and so clipping hair also too, you can have issues with abrasions to the skin and skin infections and what have you. So I prefer rather to take more practical means of preventing excessive heat exposure and trying to maximize cooling the pets as opposed to shaving their entire body.
Okay, so what are some of the ways to cool your pets? I know pets lose heat through their paws, through panting. What else can you do?
You have to recognize that every pet, of course, is different, are different just like every person is. Certain pets are more adapted for heat. If you have your Labrador Retrievers or German Shepherds, these dogs, because of their anatomic structure, are able to handle heat better than, let's say, a brachycephalic dog like a pug or a bulldog. So the most obvious answers are those that you would consider for yourself as well. Try to stay in the shade. Try to avoid direct sunlight. Have water around. Things like that are ways to help protect the pets. Some breeds just shouldn't be in the sun for extended periods of time and should really live a more sedentary lifestyle at home. And others are very active and can handle the heat very well. So you have to know your pets, what their limitations are, and be prepared to provide shade, water, and rest when you're out there in the heat.
What about walking your pet? The paws, for instance, on dogs seem thick, leathery, but can they get burned by hot pavement or on sidewalks?
The keratin that makes up the paw pads they're literally dead skin. That's what makes them so durable. The problem with that, even with the durability, the heat will still get to them. So you can either try to avoid walking on hot areas like pavement or concrete, streets, sidewalks, or you can try and protect the paws with dog booties. Now, not every pet loves dog booties either, and you don't want the pet to stress out because they have booties on their feet. You also don't want your dog to eat the booties either. Then you've got a whole other problem to deal with. So try to get your pet accustomed to booties ahead of time if that's what you're planning to do, so that when you do go on the heat, your dog is accustomed to the booties and tolerates them very well. Otherwise, try to avoid contacting hot areas. Maybe stay on the grass more or stay in the shade.
And if you do shave your pet, I used to do that with one of my very, very furry dogs. Do you use sunscreen?
They do make sunscreen for animals, and it certainly is a benefit. You need to make sure that if your pet happens to lick the sunscreen off, that it's not dangerous for ingestion. The most common areas that we see sun damage with pets are areas of the body like the bridge of the nose, the tips of the ears, their undersides where they have less hair. Those pets that have less hair in general or are fairly fair-skinned are also more likely to have UV damage from the light. So you want to protect those areas. You can try also covering those areas with clothing, but of course, if you're in the sun, it's probably hot already, so clothing may worsen that. And then, of course, stay in the shade for added protection.
Also with us is Hillary Gray. She's the new CEO of the Animal Foundation in Las Vegas. Hillary, welcome to State of Nevada.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you as well. Now, first, Hillary, the Animal Foundation has an enormous job. Your website says in 2021 you returned 4,400 pets to owners, fostered 2,400 pets, and spayed or neutered 8,100 animals. And there is this. Before you became CEO, news reports said employees there were neglecting basic duties like answering emails, returning calls, and employees reported understaffing or low pay. Before we get into this other stuff, how is the situation now?
Things are going really, really well. I think the Animal Foundation had issues like a lot of places did during the pandemic, where, things moved a little bit slower because people not coming out as much, had to do adoptions by appointment, which meant more animals in the shelter waiting a little bit longer than normally. But we had some expert assistance from UC Davis and from Maddie's Fund when I came in, kind of looking at some of our practices. Since I've been here towards the end of January, we've hired a new COO, and the team is really very dedicated to the health and safety of the animals, to a great customer service experience. So things have been going really, really well. We've made some good productive changes, but the heart of the team has always been with the animals, and, we really look forward to doing a lot of good in the community, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, which you mentioned, there were a lot of people out of work. Many people stayed at home, and a lot of people got pets to keep them company. When people returned to work, did you see an increase in the number of people saying, I can't do it, I can't care for this pet, and dropping them off at the foundation?
Thankfully, that was a supposition, I think, that was made out there, even in the next. That we really didn't see come true, which is great. Even before I got to the Animal Foundation, I was on the board of Nevada SPCA when we were moving them to a new home and kind of hearing about this and bracing for that great return, which didn't happen. I think what's great is, as you observed at the top of the hour, people love their animals like family, loved having them around, maybe can be a little bit more flexible with work, and now are looking for, what's out there for doggy daycare? Can I bring my dog to work with me? What are some arrangements that I can make to make sure that, my pet is happy even as I'm returning to the workplace? So that's a very happy thing that we haven't seen that return happen.
That's great.
On the other side, though, I will say that, with the lifting of eviction moratoriums and things like that, there are people who have needed a little bit more help to keep their pets. So we have programs at the Animal Foundation for that, which we're really thankful for, where we can bring pet food, some rent assistance, things like that for people in need of just that little bit of help, when they're having financial difficulties, because having a pet brings so much hope and so much love and gets people through a lot.
And Hillary, during the summer heat, when this hits, what kind of different issues do you see at the Animal Foundation?
The heat obviously affects everyone, the staff and the animals. And really what's best for like our adoptable dogs too is they have outdoor and indoor access. So we're making sure that they always have shade, they always have water on both sides, whether they're inside or outside. We're doing play groups and things like that all the time. We want them to have exercise, but we're taking precautions with shade. Some of the enrichment we do has things like we freeze Kongs with peanut butter, and that's not only a great enrichment treat for them, but it also helps keep them cool. So we take a lot of extra precautions like that. We have puppy pools that we have the dogs playing in as part of their play groups and part of their enrichment too. So we take that really seriously. One of the new things this year is in our adoption bungalows too. We've put up some extra shade space, thermometers to make sure we're always monitoring the temperature, a lot of fans, and that helps pets and people. And I will say too, my dog that I've had in Las Vegas here with me for 11 years is a sheepdog. And so the point about shaving your animal, I take seriously. Sometimes my dog will get like a puppy cut for the summer, but never shaved all the way down, because that does protect him. And our solution is that we start walking at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning. We adjust with the time zones.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There are about 9 states in this country that allow people who do not own the car to break a car's window if they see an animal inside that's in distress, very hot. That isn't the law in Nevada. But what about that situation, Hillary? What should someone do if they see a pet suffering in the heat inside of a car?
I know calling law enforcement right away for some help with that. If you're in a situation where you can try to find the owner, like if it's in a shopping center or something like that, that's always the best thing. I'm not super up to speed on what the law allows here, but really for people that are pet owners, I know in the winter it's nice to be able to take your pet around on errands and things like that, but you never want to leave your pet alone in a car during the summer, even for a short time. They warn you about it with kids, and the same is true of pets, and they get hot really quickly, as I'm sure the doctor can also attest.
Yeah, in Nevada, it isn't legal to leave your pet in a hot car, but it's also illegal to break the window of a vehicle to rescue a dog unless you are a police officer or animal control officer. Breaking the window, the law says, should be the absolute last resource to save an animal. But our staff had a few questions, and one is concern about wild animals that might attack pets. This is something that's come up over the years in Las Vegas. Coyotes, mountain lions, hawks, for instance. Hillary, you have an animal you've had for many years, a sheepdog. What should people do to be wary of that or to prevent something like that from happening?
Oh gosh, that's a big area. I mean, keeping your pets in the home and not letting them roam around. I know it's an issue when people have indoor-outdoor cats. For me, I live in an area that has some trails that are well lit and that kind of thing. Try to walk when there are other people around too. Get familiar with your local patrols and people that can scare off some of that wildlife. It's tough because we live in the desert and you see a lot of coyotes where golf courses have dried up and sources of water, and so they can jump pretty high over walls, and you just have to be really careful and know where your pet is, and be a good engaged pet owner.
And Dr. Shadi, another staff member, has a cat that gets very energetic at 3 a.m. long before she's awake. What could she do during the day, perhaps, to make sure that cat, I guess, remains calm or doesn't jump around so much at 3 o'clock in the morning?
You could try and first figure out why this is happening. If there's a way to decide if there's something environmental that's causing that level of activity at the inappropriate hour, or if it may be something more medical, of course, then see a veterinarian and get diagnostics performed for that pet. Otherwise, if you're looking at ways to calm your cat down, you have two broad categories. One is pharmaceutical intervention, so medications that your vet can prescribe, sedatives and things like that, or you can go the more holistic approach, products like CBD and what have you. These are areas that either a holistic veterinarian can comment more on, or are popular online through pet communities, and try and through trial and error figure out if there's a way to calm your cat down. The ideal method really is to figure out why this may be happening and then change that aspect to it. But if you can't, those are your two categories you can try and intervene with. I was also going to comment further on the wild animal attack from a veterinary perspective.
Yeah.
Rabies vaccination is very important. And so mishaps are going to happen. Animals are going to be attacked by other animals, whether domestic or wild. You want to make sure your pet is vaccinated for rabies. It's not only incredibly lethal to get rabies, it's also legally you need to be covered for that. And plus, it's a zoonotic disease. And people can get rabies from animals as well. So make sure your pets are vaccinated for rabies.
And Dr. Shadi, I think this question is from you. This is Megan from Henderson, who writes, "My dog throws up if he's in the car even 5 minutes. How do I help him?"
So there's a couple ways you can tackle that. Number one, obviously, you can always avoid car rides, I suppose, but that's, of course, not realistic for most pet owners these days. Second way you can try and tackle that is have your pet get used to the car ride slowly over time, acclimate them. So first go into the car and take a very, very short trip, and then gradually over time lengthen the distance that you travel with them in the car. Maybe their bodies will get used to the motion sickness from it. Otherwise, your third option is to consider pharmacological intervention. Something as simple as Benadryl, for example, has been shown to help with nausea, and so that could be given, all the way up to actual motion sickness medications that you can get either over the counter. Just make sure you check with your veterinarian regarding if the product is safe, what the dose is, or prescriptions from the veterinarian as well. So there are measures you can take to try and help with those car rides.
Is that motion sickness medicine the same that people take?
Yeah, Dramamine,
yeah.
Meclizine. Yep, those are common motion sickness medications that I believe are over the counter, and you can just check with your veterinarian regarding the dosing and frequency, but you can utilize those medications for this purpose.
All right, Megan from Henderson, thank you so much for that call. Now with us is Rob from Las Vegas. Rob, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I was calling about I got a pamphlet from the Animal Foundation, but it doesn't say what it costs to rent those humane traps for feral cats.
Okay, well, that's a question for Hillary. Hillary, if somebody wants to rent a feral cat trap from the Animal Foundation, what do they do? Where do they go? How much does it cost?
They are free. They can talk to us about participating in trap and release programs. That's very important for helping to control the roaming cat population in Las Vegas. We get feral or community cats in. We want to spay or neuter them and get them right back to where they were because they're thriving out in the wild there. And if I can add too, since we're talking community cats for a second, a big tip for all of your listeners is in the spring and the summer, a lot of people will run across these colonies of cats, including groups of kittens. And sometimes if they don't see the mother kitten right there, they will grab those kittens and bring them to us at the Animal Foundation. Really, please don't do that because chances are the mom is just out getting some food. We have some tips for how to tell if the mom is close by on our website that you can look at. But leaving those kittens that are with their mom where they are, they stand a much better chance of survival. And right now, we're getting a lot of really tiny baby kittens into our nursery, and we so many fosters that are bottle feeding babies that probably could have been okay if they hadn't been brought into us. So, people, please watch that as you see a lot of cats in the community. There's like 300,000 roaming cats in Clark County right now.
Wow. By the way, some people don't know this. There is a feral cat program in Clark County. Could you explain what the program is for?
Like I say, trap and release is kind of what we want to do with feral cats, where there are some groups and partners, and our Community Cats program does this too. We're ramping it back up from where we were during the pandemic, where our staff numbers were a little bit down, didn't get out as often. But again, you want to find those cats that are out in the community, adult cats, trap them, get them spayed or neutered. We have a lot of partners in the community that do that too, like Heaven Can Wait. So, various organizations have this program where it's trapped, spay, neuter, and then released back into the community so that they can't reproduce. And you'll see cats in the community that are ear-tipped. They have a little notch on their ear that doesn't hurt them, but that lets you know that they've already been seen, spayed or neutered.
Yeah, I've got feral cats all over my neighborhood, and I guess I don't mind them. If I've never seen a rat or a tree rat or a palm rat or anything in my neighborhood, so
right?
I guess it's your own, it's each individual's perspective.
Well, it's funny. Our community cat program staff, they do a lot of education in the community too, because animal control will get nuisance calls sometimes about feral cats, and it's like, cover your trash, don't leave food out. But there are community cats out there that effectively have like 3 or 4 owners because they travel around and people are feeding them in their backyard, like that. So cats can be pretty independent in that environment and live pretty well, but the important thing is to get them spayed or neutered so that we don't have that overpopulation issue.
And Hillary, what about this? I mentioned this in the introduction. More and more I'm seeing, and I'm seeing people write about this, pets in restaurants, in stores, in casinos. I've seen all three, and I've seen and I've heard complaints from people about this. Should there be, or is there a limitation? I just kind of want your perspective on that.
It's really business by business because, as you have observed, pets are family to a lot of people. They want to take their pets with them, and you see like a lot of pet-friendly businesses developing, not just like your cafes where you can eat with your pets outdoors, but other places that welcome them. And I think that the key is to do your research if you're a pet owner and make sure that you're taking your pets into places where they are welcome. There's still, most places will only accept service animals. And, you see people that sort of cheat or will buy a vest and say that their animal is a service animal, or clearly it isn't. So you have to have respect for the businesses that you enter. But the good news for pet owners is I think the community is becoming a lot more pet friendly, and that there are a lot of places that do welcome pets. So just do your research. And I think if that's becoming an issue for the county or one of the cities, if businesses are having trouble turning people away, then that's definitely going to be an issue for lawmakers. But I really think that most places are very upfront about what their rules are, and you just have to know where you're going.
And Dr. Shoddy, when this was mentioned to me by somebody, they posed it as a health issue. I wonder what your perspective is.
Well, I think the main premise really with this is two things. Be considerate of other people's feelings. Not everybody is as pet friendly as we'd like them to be, and don't see pets the same way that we do. And the second aspect, probably more importantly, is use common sense. Make sure that your pets are adequately restrained so that there's no risk of them inadvertently biting somebody or another pet. Make sure your pet is free of infectious diseases, dewormings, viral infections, things like that, which obviously you go through your veterinarian to figure that out. But these are very simple, common sense endeavors for folks to keep in mind. And then, of course, hygiene. Make sure that if you're in a place where there's food, that your pet is not mingling around where humans are going to consume those products. So common sense really plays a huge part in this with hygiene and we're not spreading diseases.
And now joining us is Terry from Arizona, who has an issue with feral cats. Welcome.
Hi, my issue is feral cats in the wild. Like along the river, I used to live in Yuma, and we had a terrible problem with people just coming down and dumping cats because there was a nature park right next to us. And these cats, somehow leukemia got into the population. So you drop off a cat that was maybe clean and the owner died and you didn't know what to do with it, instead of taking it to the pound and maybe getting adopted out again, you drop it off. So pretty soon that cat's got leukemia too.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is the cats don't belong in the wild, especially down by the river. They eat the birds. They mess up the ecosystem. So if you have cats that you want to drop off, please take them to the pound. Maybe they can be, adopted out again. But you drop them off and you don't know what's going to happen to them.
Yeah,
and it's not a good life.
Yeah, you make a really good point. Hillary Gray, CEO at the Animal Foundation, when presumably feral animal is brought into the foundation, what do you do? Do you quarantine them from other animals for a while? Do you vaccinate them right away? What happens?
I mean, when it's a feral animal and we bring them in, we obviously, our vet crew examines everybody to make sure that if there is disease, that it doesn't affect the entire shelter population, that we can treat anything. But generally, with a feral cat, our goal is to spay or neuter and return them out into the community where they can thrive as quickly as possible, those ones that aren't going to get adopted. I think your caller is also referring to, and it's just heartbreaking if that happens, that people would drop off house cats that shouldn't be in that population. And she's right. I mean, if there is a house cat whose owner has passed on or, needs to be rehomed, there are shelters in every community that can help. And, we want to get those cats adopted into new homes as quickly as possible, too.
As we said earlier, Hillary, the Animal Foundation deals with thousands of animals. I don't know, I'm not quite sure how to ask this, but are there certain dogs maybe that are harder to adopt out?
Sure, and in my opinion, they shouldn't be, because there are wonderful dogs of every age, breed, and size. But there are some, and I would say unjustified breed reputational things that come into play. We do see a lot of pit breeds, and also just larger dogs in general tend to be harder to adopt. Even though I think big dogs are wonderful, and a lot of the time they actually are calmer than smaller dogs. Smaller dogs tend to go faster out the door. And then, folks that are looking for a younger animal and will overlook some really wonderful seniors or older animals that just need a second chance. there's really beauty in all animals of all sizes and, lots of different temperaments. I was just reading in one of the scientific journals that there's a study now that says that personality has more to do with what's going to happen with an individual animal than breed. And people read a lot into breed characteristics. That's actually one of the reasons why with our adoptable population, we don't necessarily identify them by breed because they can be mixes and, we don't want people to be predisposed towards one dog or another just because they have a view of a certain breed.
Yeah, I know somebody in Las Vegas who has, I was shocked to hear this, has a pet leopard. Does the Animal Foundation have a viewpoint on ownership of an exotic animal?
Just like the governing authorities here, we have a lot of concerns about, homes that have exotic animals. I can't speak to the law enforcement aspect of it, but there are plenty of good domestic dogs, cats. We get a lot of reptiles and fish and the whole gamut, where there are a lot of really neat animals that you can own and not take what would be considered a wild animal and put them in a domestic environment where maybe they won't thrive.
Yeah, and Dr. Shoddy, speaking of reptiles, the 9-year-old son of a producer here wants a reptile. She's thinking of getting a bearded dragon for her son. Is that a good pet, do you think, for a 9-year-old, or a good pet in general?
It really depends on your 9-year-old's ability to take care of such a pet by doing the research. So definitely these exotic pets, even though some like bearded dragons are very common and also make great pets, they require a lot of care, and they're very sensitive, especially if they're not in the proper environment at home. So make sure that you do the proper research, find out exactly what they need, everything from the temperature, the humidity, measuring those parameters, the cage size, diet, and what is normal, what's abnormal as far as how they are. They can be very tricky in terms of actually showing you when they're sick. They could be sick for a while and not show any signs. The next thing you know, they're really ill. And so you want to make sure you do your research ahead of time, definitely educate yourself, watch plenty of videos, read plenty of books, and then when you're ready to dive in, go ahead and enjoy that pet appropriately.
So that sounds like a difficult, pet to take care of. And if this child really wants a reptile, are there others you might suggest? I think they already have a desert tortoise. What else is out there? Some kind of snake that the kid might like? I mean, is there a safe snake out there?
There are many different species, and some cannot be pets, and others are made great pets and everything in between. Just like dogs and cats, these certain species have typical characteristics of personalities and behavior, making them more pet friendly than others. So it really just comes down to doing your research and figuring out what species is best for you. There are species of snakes, turtles, lizards, all of which are exotic and run the gamut of different personality types.
Lewis from Henderson, welcome to the program.
Hi, I just heard the comment that the guest talking about adoption issues, and I wonder how much of that problem is compounded by the puppies for sale market that exists here. I know California banned puppies from being sold years ago now, and that seemed to have helped a lot, especially with adoptions and things like that. So I wanted to get your guest's take on that issue and what can be done.
Yeah, like backyard breeders. We've had that issue in Las Vegas for years. Maybe 10 years ago, we had a public official who was involved in something like that. I'm not going to get into that story. But Hillary Gray, CEO of the Animal Foundation, what about that? How big of an issue are backyard breeders and things like that?
Yeah, Lewis, that's a fantastic question. And the city of Las Vegas some years ago did adopt the puppy mill ordinance, which would have banned the sale of puppy mill pets within the city of Las Vegas limits. And then they rescinded it. And what's happened is there weren't a lot of pet stores in the valley several years back. It was a couple of pet lands. And since the pandemic, unfortunately, what we're being told by the Humane Society and others is that more and more pet stores that are trafficking puppy mill pets have come up, and that's a big concern. It's a concern that we have and that we're talking to our municipal officials about all the time now. Backyard breeders are another issue, and there is a legal process if you are a legitimate breeder to have a fancier's permit and to do all of that. It's really an issue for animal control, who we work with all the time from North Las Vegas, and Clark County. It's a big concern, and it's an issue for them for sure.
Hillary Gray, I'll admit I haven't been to a pet store, a pet food store, or anything like that in quite a while. I thought there were limitations on stores like that from selling certain animals, or am I wrong in that regard?
Like I say, a lot of communities, like your caller alluded to in California, I know in Chicago and a lot of other big cities, they have successfully banned the sale of puppy mill pets, which has really helped adoptions and helped, the health and safety of those animals too, because there's a lot of bad players out there that are breeding dogs for profit that have, and I'm sure your vet can speak to this too, a lot of diseases and health problems because of the puppy mill situations. So that's very serious. And it is something, when I came on board here at the Animal Foundation, we met with the Humane Society right away, and we've talked to the county and the cities that we work with about introducing ordinances like that again to prevent that from happening here.
And joining us now is Susan from Las Vegas. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you. A few minutes ago, Hillary was talking about the difficulty of adopting out certain breeds, certain size dogs, and I think part of that, or maybe a lot of it, is because many homeowners associations, apartment complex management, they have that written into the lease or rental agreement that you cannot have a dog over certain weight. I don't understand the logic of that at all. As you were saying, Joe, a lot of big dogs are much easier to handle, are better neighbors. And the breed thing, there's a lot of discrimination against the pit breeds, which, if they're brought up right, they're very sweet animals. And I know those are private companies that are doing that, and I suppose they have the right to, but isn't there a way to get that rethought on,
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the same rules for all dogs. They have to be on a leash. If they're outdoors, the owner has to pick up behind them. So, can't we get? It's discriminatory.
Yeah, and Susan, thank you for the call. You're obviously a pet lover and animal lover, and I appreciate your call. And Hillary Gray, do you know of any laws that could prevent a property owner from discriminating against a pet based on its size?
That's another area that the Humane Society and others in the community that will be lobbying the legislature next year especially would like to ban that practice of breed discrimination if possible. So what I would do is definitely talk to your legislator. You see some of things changing. As I drive around Las Vegas, I do see apartment complexes more and more that say all pets welcome, because totally agree with Susan. The size of your animal is not necessarily a predictor of either how loud or how messy it's going to be. And when you find even pet-friendly hotels now, more and more of them will accept pets of all sizes, and that's a good change. But that is something that I think that we can work together to legislate to, breed discrimination. It all sets back into that mindset of who's adoptable and who isn't, and there are a lot of wonderful animals out there that don't get homes because of that.
And Hillary, aside from adoption, the Animal Foundation has a foster program. But I just learned about that within the last couple of years. But what does fostering an animal mean? How's it work?
We have people that will foster to help give animals some time out of the shelter and free up some space for others. A lot of our fosters become foster failures, where they love an animal that they fostered and end up adopting it themselves. Or the other wonderful thing that happens is they have a dog or cat in their home, and they talk to their friends about it, and they perform what's called an ambassador adoption, where they find somebody who wants to adopt that animal. So anybody over 18 can be a foster with us. We want people that will give an animal a loving home while they're waiting for their next step to be adopted. And we'll take care of the supplies, too, to make that happen. I mentioned before we have a lot of kitten fosters right now, and that's a whole other skill, where we have tiny kittens that need to be bottle fed around the clock. And you'd be surprised at the number of people that will do that over and over again, like really big-hearted people that want to help and make sure as many animals as possible can get home.
Okay, Hillary, so how can you tell if somebody is going to be a good pet foster parent? I mean, there are pretty strict regulations when people want to foster a child, a human child, and you don't want to end up with somebody who is going to treat an animal poorly or try to train it in a bad way. What do you look for, or how do you discern between who might be good and who might not be good?
Oh, I mean, you're exactly right. Of course not. We don't want animals, either adopted animals or fostered animals, to end up in bad places. What you're describing, thankfully, are the very, very rare exceptions. Normally, people that are coming forward to foster are doing it because they love animals. We do check everybody against animal cruelty databases to make sure there's nobody with that background. And we do interviews and we do training if you're going to be a foster, how to be a good foster and the kinds of things that we'd like you to do to give that pet a good home. We also have, for people who want to help in other ways but maybe can't keep a pet overnight, we have a program called Foster Field Trips, where, there's a woman who works near the Animal Foundation who will take big dogs out for a run sometimes during the day when the weather's nice, probably not as it gets hotter. But we do have that program where you can get a dog out of the shelter for a few hours, take them in the car, take them out to Red Rock or to a pet-friendly cafe, and it's good for the dogs and it's good for the people. So we definitely encourage people to do that. It's very helpful.
That's Hillary Gray. And we have an email from JP who says, I have a 90-pound dog. My wife insisted we get him training. Is that in the nature of a dog, he writes? Is it inhumane to have a dog with no training or a dog with that military-style training? And I'm going to turn that to Dr. Shadi. What are dogs happier if they're trained?
Well, I can tell you that people certainly are happier. It's kind of like having a badly behaved child. Nobody wants to be around a child who's misbehaving. And so the same thing with pets. And then, of course, pets can bite, obviously. So you want to make sure that they're trained for the sake of the people in that pet's life. Whether or not pets are happier being trained or not, it's tough to say. But if you know that pets are pack animals, they want to be part of a pack, and if that pack includes human beings, well, then it behooves all the members in that pack to behave in a way that's acceptable by that pack. And so from that point of view, I would say, sure, they're probably happier that way, but it's still a socially constructed endeavor on all parties involved. So pets they're not born understanding that they need to be trained for the human pack model, let's say. But I would think that since they are pack animals, if they are welcome socially because they are well trained, that makes everybody happy at the end of the day.
And we also have a call from Hector from Las Vegas, who has an interesting question about dog safety while driving. Hector, welcome.
Hi, how's everyone doing? Thank you for taking my call. Yeah, so I guess my concern also, we treat our mascots and, like family. And a lot of times I think we forget that there's also safety issues out there when we're driving our families around. And obviously we want to be as safe as possible with our own family members, but also others around us. And a lot of times I see that people are driving around with their pets on their laps in front of the steering wheel. I mean, that's kind of an issue for me, in that how people a lot of times don't think, I guess, that they could be a very big distraction when we're trying to keep our eyes on the road and around us. So is there any data to say that, there should be something a bit safer for us while we're taking our pets also on the road?
Yeah, that's a good question. It sounds inherently dangerous, an inherent distraction. There's a certain unpredictability when you have a pet. But Hillary Gray or Dr. Shadi, is there any research? Basically, what's your opinion about that?
I defer to the doctor. There are a lot of good safety devices out there for pets that are really easy to use, little pet car seats, seatbelt attachments that will attach right to the harness, and that's really important. But doctor might have something to say about that. Dr.
Shadi?
I would go back to the common sense aspect of this. If there are no strict laws on this type of practice, then of course you want to use common sense. The same way if you have your phone on you in the car, you want to use common sense. And so make sure that if you're realizing your dog is a distraction in the car, as Hillary said, try to find dog safety, dog approved seatbelts, car seats for dogs. They do exist, and that'll help minimize those types of incidents from occurring. We definitely don't want to discourage people from riding with their pets because, of course, they're going to ride with their pets as they should. But we want to make sure that you maximize your safety by using common sense.
Dr. Shadi, over the weekend I heard what sounded like gunshots within distance of my home. I thought, it's another weekend in Vegas. But actually, they were fireworks somebody's blowing off, and 4th of July is coming up, and boy, it is really, really hard on some pets when those fireworks are going off. Is there something that pet owners can do to keep their pets calm during these fireworks shows? Not even just the shows. I'm talking about people just blowing things off in their backyards.
Yeah, there's two broad categories of interventions you can consider. One, of course, is environmental change. So if you know there's a big holiday coming up and the area you live in typically celebrates with fireworks, then try to leave the area, go to a quieter place if you have that kind of luxury, and that's planning ahead, of course. Obviously, in the scenario where you are unable to plan for such a circumstance, or you don't have that luxury, then you're looking at pharmaceutical interventions, either from the doctor, from a veterinarian, or over-the-counter remedies. There are, I believe, there's actually a lot of over-the-counter products you can find online. I'm not as familiar with them, but I know folks have used them to try and help soothe the pet's anxiety as it relates to loud sounds and things like that. So you can get pretty creative if you go online and look for more over-the-counter options. But of course, with veterinarians, there's always pharmacological ways of intervening. Otherwise, plan ahead, change the environment as you see fit.
Dr. Shadi, we have about a minute left, but you get about 15 seconds for this question from Cricket in Las Vegas. Can all dogs be trained?
So the answer is maybe. Okay. It depends on their personality type and depends on the breed. There are some breeds that are just much more difficult to train than others. There are some personality types that just don't lend them to being trained. So it really does depend on the individual pet.